is ordinary. That's what happens to us with our blessings. You might have your father, your mother around you right now. Because they're around you all the time, you assume this is always how life is going to be. You assume this is ordinary because you have this blessing around you all the time. But this is a big, big mistake. If I'm healthy, I have my health with me all the time, I automatically start to move in that direction where I feel like, yes, health, it's an ordinary thing. Well, reality is that no, health is not an ordinary thing. There are many who wish they were as healthy as you are. There are many who wish they were in your place. فَلَوْلَا تَشْكُرُونَ. Where is your shukr? Where is your thanks? It is never correct to assume that because I find a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala around me, that means that this blessing is ordinary. No, that's a big mistake that we have to stay away from. So he says, this water that you all drink, this is another big blessing that we gave to you, though you might pass by it and assume that it's ordinary, it's normal. Okay, another batch of verses are done here. He says, وَيْلٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ. This is verse 27. Now, verse 28. Now he is going to move on to verse 29 onwards. Verse 29 onwards is now starting to give us a little bit of a description of the day of judgment, and in this case, in particular, a description of hellfire. It says, these people who deny our messages, we keep telling them, waylun, waylun, woe to you, you're going to be in trouble. This is bad news. We are warning you of this bad news. When they show up on the day of judgment, what are they told? And it's very interesting, and this is a topic for another time, for somebody to go and gather the different things that are said to the people of heaven and the people of hellfire on the day of judgment. You know, many of us worry about what people will say about us in this world. We don't worry so much what the angels will say to us on the day of judgment. Many of us worry, what will this person say to me? What will that person say to me? I don't worry, what will I be told on the day of judgment? How will I be addressed on the day of judgment? When you look into Quran and Hadith, there is a lot of discussion, different verses of the Quran, different ahadith. The things that the people of heaven and the people of hellfire are told on the day of judgment as they walk through this mahshar, as they walk through the other servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala towards heaven or hell. This is one of them. When these people show up on that day, they are told, انطلقوا إلى ما كنتم به تكذبون. Walk towards that same thing that you used to deny. You remember that thing that you used to laugh at? You remember that thing that you knew it was true, but you still openly denied it? You remember that thing that the Quran used to tell you about and you used to constantly reject it? Intaliqu, now you walk towards that thing that you were constantly denying before. Intaliqu ila ma kuntum bihi tukadhibun. What is that thing? Intaliqu ila dhillin dhi thalath shu'ab. Walk towards the smoke that has 3 heads, has 3 branches. It's branched out in 3 directions. And what we understand from this verse of the Quran is that this smoke, of course, this is a burning smoke. It is there to punish the people of hellfire. But as you can tell from the verse, it has multiple heads, has multiple branches. It is surrounding this individual from the top, from the right, from the left. And this also goes hand in hand with some of the other verses of the Quran that we read, that the people who show up on that day, the punishment of hellfire is one that surrounds the individual. It is from different directions. لهم من جهنم من مهاد. Yes. لهم جهنم من مهاد. From beneath them there is a hellfire. ومن فوقهم غواش. And the hellfire is also surrounding them and covering them from the top as well. Right? And the Quran says ومن تحتهم ومن فوقهم. There is punishment from the top and from the bottom. Everywhere they turn, the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. وَإِنَّ جَهَنَّمَ لَمُحِيطَةٌ بِالْكَافِرِينَ. Hellfire has circled the kafirin. What does that mean? It means it's coming from all directions. Of course, for us, when we hear these verses of the Quran, We hear that the punishment is coming from all directions. We have a physical understanding of this. We have a materialistic understanding of this. We think of directions in the way we have directions in this world. The reality is that on that day, because it's a different world, because there are different dynamics, this punishment surrounding the individual is not so much that the punishment comes from every direction. Yes, the Quran is explaining it in this way so that we can understand it a little bit better. But the main reason why the punishment of an individual is surrounding him from every direction is because the punishment stems from who he is. It doesn't stem from an external factor. The punishments that we find in this world, they stem from an external factor. I'm not the one punishing myself. There's someone else who's punishing me. Yes? That's why that person, if he wants to surround me, he has to come at me from every direction. But the hereafter, the punishment of hereafter, it is me, myself. I am the one who the punishment is stemming from. The evil of my deeds is coming from me. It's coming from my own soul. That's where the punishment stems from. It's not that I am one thing and this punishment is a separate thing. No. This punishment is coming from what I've done to my soul, from how evil my soul has become. And therefore, because it's stemming from who I am, I can't run away from it. It is continuously surrounding me. Because you can run away from everything in this life, you can't run away from yourself. The human being can run away from everything. You can have a mastermind to figure out things, but you can't run away from who you are. When you go to the next world, they show you who you are. And the evil in the soul of the human being, if this person is an evil individual, is always with him because he can't run away from who he is. That's his essence. That's his core. And if he has hurt his own soul, if his own soul is evil, well, then he's going to feel this punishment not as an external punishment, as a punishment that stems from within himself. And this is why in Surah Al-Humaza, we read, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. Woe to the one who makes fun of others, he looks for the flaws of others. And the verses of the Quran continue, it says, كَلَّا لَيُنْبَذَنَّ فِي الْحُطَمَةِ. This person is going to be thrown into hellfire. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحُطَمَةِ. نَارُ اللَّهِ الْمُوقَدَةِ. It's the punishment of the fire that is ablaze. There's flames that it has. And then he says this fire, التي تطلع على الأفئدة. It is a punishment that burns within the hearts. Why? Because this is not a punishment that's coming from the outside. It's a punishment that's there because of who this person is. And in other verses of the Quran we read, and this is mentioned I believe twice in the verses of the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to those who fundamentally reject His message, not the one who accepts the message and he has shortcomings, no, the one who fundamentally, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. This one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this one when he ends up in hellfire, وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ وَقُودُ النَّارِ. Waqud is the wood that you put into the fire that then becomes the source of fire itself. The Quran says these individuals are the source of fire. It's not that we are punishing them. It said these individuals, we just unveil to them what their soul is like. And this individual has so much evil in his soul that that evil becomes a means of punishment and torture for himself. And the problem is, in this world he could run away from things, but in the next world he can't run away from himself now, can he? You can't run away from yourself. You can't run away from who you are at your very own core. This is why the punishment of the Day of Judgment is surrounding the disbeliever. It's surrounding this individual because it's stemming from who he is, and he can never run away from who he is. Now, of course, the verses of the Quran at times will give us other descriptions that seem a bit more materialistic, a bit more physical. Yes, that yes, there will be a punishment from the top and the bottom, and from different directions, and from different, from this part, this side, and that side, and their front and their back. The Quran gives these descriptions because it's trying to give us a little bit of an idea of what's happening. But the reality is that the punishment in the next world is very different from the punishment that we might experience in this world. In this world, you can run away from it. In the next world, because it stems from who you are, wherever you are, that punishment is also going to be there as well. That's why Surah Al-Humazah, the continuation of it says, التي تطلع على الأفئدة إنها عليهم مؤصدة. This is a fire that encompasses them. It's not a fire that's coming from one or two or even multiple directions. It's a fire that covers them totally. This is what the verse of the Quran is saying. انطلقوا إلى ما كنتم به تكذبون انطلقوا إلى ظل ذي ثلاث شعب. Walk towards the smoke that is coming to you from different directions. It is smoke, but it is not a means of shade. And this is a literary beauty of the Quran, because he's using two words from the same root word, but one of them he is saying applies to the smoke, the other one he's saying does not apply to the smoke. He says this smoke is dhillin, it's dark, but it is not dhalil. It doesn't give you any shade. You sit under the shade so that you can feel cool, yes? You sit under the shade so that you can protect yourself from the heat. The Quran says this is dhill. It's dark, but it also isn't a shade. Dhillin, but he says there's no dhalil in it. There's no shade in it. La dhalilin wala yughni min al-lahab. And it also does not protect you from the hellfire, from the flames of hellfire either. Moving on. It says, إِنَّهَا تَرْمِي بِشَرَرٍ كَالْقَصْرِ. This hellfire and this smoke, it has flames that are moving out of it. If you've ever seen the picture of the sun, this is probably the best way to explain these verses. If you see a picture of the sun, what happens when you see a picture of the sun? If you zoom in from far away, it's just, it looks a bit, it's just a lot of light. If you were to zoom in and take a look at the picture, you will see things that look like explosions taking place on the surface of the sun. What's happening? They call it a prominence. Yes? It's a type of gas that it's charged. It's something like an explosion, though it's not really an explosion, but it's something like that. Yes? When you look at it from far away, it looks like a ball that's on fire. But there are flames shooting out of it in every direction. The Quran says the punishment on that day, the fire on that day is similar, because there are flames coming out of it, kal-qasra, like long and tall buildings. And then it says this, كَأَنَّهُ جِمَالَةٌ صُفْرَةٌ. The yellowness, the color of these flames is like the yellow camels. Now this, of course, bears a question here. Out of all of the objects that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could use to reference the color of this punishment, why is it that he keeps going back to camels? And this is a question that doesn't just come up regarding this verse. Multiple verses of the Quran, the same issue comes up. The Quran, we say, is a book for 1400 years and counting. It is the final book from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would tell everybody, yes? Why is it that when the Quran wants to explain these concepts, it keeps going back to the camel? The answer to this question, of course, is that the camel is an animal that the Arab of that time, and maybe one would say even up to today, was very much interacting with on a daily basis. It was easier for them to understand when you spoke of the camel. It was much more impactful when you brought up the camel, because the camel was something that they were dealing with on a daily basis. And it's not just this verse of the Quran. The Quran says, for example, that the people of hellfire, they will drink, but they will never feel full. And he says, just like a camel that at times, that might be sick, for example, drinks, but he's never full. Then in other verses of the Quran, he says, listen, the people who deny the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will not enter into heaven unless a camel is passed through the thread of a needle. A verse we touched on before. Yes? Then when he wants to speak about the natural phenomena you should be thinking about, he says, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Why don't you look at the camel? Everywhere you look, there's mention of this camel. Why? وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. When the valuable camel, no one cares about it anymore. Referring to the day of judgment, meaning everyone is worried about their own situation. Why does the Quran keep going back to this camel? Yes, it's something that the Arab used to interact with on a daily basis, so it was much more impactful for them. But of course, the Quran is supposed to be a book for 1400 years and counting. It should use examples that I can relate to, that the Arab can relate to. Why does the Quran keep going back to the camel? The reason for this, and we touched on this before when we were discussing the reason why the Quran describes heaven and hell sometimes in a very, very physical and materialistic manner. The reason for this is because the Quran is a book for the people of the time of the Prophet, as well as the people of today, as well as the people that will come thousands of years later. But out of these people, if you look at the ones who are needing the most need, they have the most need for help and assistance to understand the Quran better, it is the people of the time of the Prophet. Because as the human being progresses, as the human being grows, as time goes by, the human being also intellectually grows as well. It's easier for the human being to understand different concepts as he goes. The people of the time of the Prophet, they needed more help. This is why the Quran, many times when he wants to describe different things, he will describe things in their particular wording, in their particular terminology. If you want to put it into an analogy, you think of it this way. If you have 5 children, for example, and at different ages, the one who's the eldest, if he's 18, you don't need much to explain to him. Yes? You don't need to explain every little thing to him. You don't have to give him 1,000 different examples. You don't have to speak to him with objects and terminology that he deals with every single day. He'll get it either way. But the child who's 5, now you have to use objects that he deals with every single day. This is why the Quran, when it comes to these examples, the Quran might use animals, objects that the people of that time were much more familiar with, because the people of previous times need more help in receiving this message. Today, I may not need this analogy of the camel as much as the people of that time needed it, for example. But this is in fact why the Quran is a book that the people of the time of the Prophet can relate to, as well as the people of today as well. Because it uses examples of these. Sometimes people will take this characteristic of the Quran, they will say this is a book that you can't relate to. No, this is the reason why this is a book that can be applied over 1400 years and counting, because it will speak to those people who need more help, with more help and examples that they can relate to, and it will speak to people who are further down the line, like you and I, in a more broad, in a more abstract, in a more immaterial manner, and we will understand it. And this is why hadith of the Ahlul Bayt says that Surah Al-Ikhlas, the final verses in Surah Al-Hadid, these are verses that the people of the end of times will have a deeper understanding of compared to the people of the time of the Prophet. Because there is a natural progression for the intellectual capabilities of the human being. As time goes on, the human being becomes stronger and more capable to understand more and more complex concepts. This is why the Quran, for that time, keeps going back to the camels, because it's something that they can relate to very easily. كَأَنَّهُ جِمَالَةٌ صُفْرٌ. And then this is the last batch of verses. He says, وَيْلٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ هَذَا يَوْمُ لَا يَنْطِقُونَ. Verse 30. Another characteristic of this day is that it is a day in which these individuals, they do not have the capability to speak. In this world, they were able to speak. They used their influence. They would threat others. They threaten others. They would, make false promises. They would do all sorts of things. They would lie. But on this day, they don't have that right anymore. On this day, they can't get out of things anymore. هذا يوم لا ينطقون. This, of course, raises a question, and inshallah, we'll leave this for the following session. But we know that on that day, there are times where people speak on that day. In fact, at times, there might be situations where a person is asked a question and that person responds on the day of judgment. Then how is it that the Quran says, هَذَا يَوْمُ لَا يَنْطِقُونَ? This is that day where they do not speak. No, I thought it was a day where they do speak. This is a question that we have to answer, inshallah, in our following session. Why is it that on one hand, the Quran says, on that day, they will be asked questions and they will try to respond to those questions. And beyond that, the verses of the Quran say on that day, there are times where people of heaven, people of hellfire, they say different things. But then why is it that here the Quran says, هَذَا يَوْمُ لَا يَنْطِقُونَ? This is the day that they do not speak. وَلَا يُؤْذَنُ لَهُمْ فَيَعْتَذِرُونَ. And they are not given permission to raise excuses for the things that they have done. But in other verses of the Quran, we read that no, in fact, they do raise excuses. How are these compatible with one another? Inshallah, with that, we'll bring tonight's talk to an end. Let us take a moment to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all of our marhumin and marhumat with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.